Hi, my name is Jack Mark. I'm the brand manager for E-flite here at Horizon Hobby, and I've got with me today Matt Andren, who's a product developer here at Horizon Hobby and worked extensively on the Timber. And we're going to cover a little bit about the features of the airplane and kind of what makes it so unique. So before we dive into this, this doesn't really quite remind me of anything I've seen, full-scale aviation. So this is an original design, right?
Yeah, exactly. Basically, I started this design myself from a blank sheet of paper, and that was one of the great things about this particular airplane. I wasn't limited by any full-size airplane I was trying to emulate or match. So if I wanted to change things on it, I can change, wingspan, wing chord, tail volume, stuff like that to just make it the most amazing STOL airplane out there.
So you mentioned that it's a STOL airplane, but when we talk about who the intended customer is for this, who we think, the pilots that are really going to gravitate towards this, how would you describe that pilot?
I mean, this is an airplane for everybody. It has something that everybody's going to enjoy about it. It'll do aerobatics. It's got the power to go vertical. It's got the big tires so you can land on just about any surface. It comes with the float. So I mean, it's a very versatile airplane, and if you can't find something fun to do with this airplane, you're in the wrong hobby.
Well, that's pretty cool. And I think there's some other things before we get into some of the more obvious features. We've got some stuff hanging on the airplane that's pretty obvious. There's some stuff under the hood that's probably worth mentioning too. And I know that it really resonates for me because I'm not a stellar pilot. I've got a little guy at home and end up pretty busy on the weekends. Don't get a whole lot of time to practice. And so I can be a little rusty if I go a few weeks without flying or something like that. So this airplane does have Safe Select,
yes.
And that's a great technology for a pilot who maybe you do have a couple of months where you're not flying, or if you go a year without flying, you want to get back into it. It's a great technology to kind of dust the cobwebs off before you put an airplane at risk. So. But I'm not going to steal too much of your thunder. So this airplane has Safe Select. What does it do for pilots? Why is it in there, and how hard is it to use?
Basically, it's extremely easy to use. If you bind the airplane kind of the way you've traditionally bound most of our park flyers, plug in the bind plug, power on the airplane, bind your transmitter, and then pull the bind plug, you have traditional AS3X. So you're not limited by any kind of safe modes or anything like that in terms of aerobatic ability. If you power on the airplane, pull the bind plug before you bind your transmitter with the receiver, you basically enable Safe Select. Safe Select has pitch and bank limits, so it keeps the airplane from getting upside down, and then also has auto leveling, so you release the sticks and the airplane will automatically return to straight and level flight.
So with the sticks released, like if you're kind of trying to coach it in for landings, that's one of the things I've heard you mention before. If you're trying to kind of bring it in for landings, you let go of the sticks, it'll come back. So managing your pitch and your power on final, you really have this awesome stabilized approach.
Exactly.
Without having the full workload of that. Now, let's say that's great. So now, if I bind it the way that you said, which is a little bit different from the regular bind process,
correct,
then I've got the Safe Select on, but then it's on all the time, right? So
yes.
How would I go about turning that off while it's in the air?
The great thing is basically you can assign Safe Select to a switch, and it's extremely easy to do. You pretty much put the sticks in the inside corners and then flip whatever switch you want 5 times, and that assigns that switch to be able to turn from AS3X to Safe Select. So you can be able to turn it on and off in flight, use Safe Select for the takeoffs and landings, turn it off to be able to do aerobatics in flight. So very, very versatile system.
So that's really handy, I think, for the folks that are maybe really interested in pushing the envelope, no pun intended, maybe a little bit intended, pushing the envelope as far as short takeoff and landings go, because then, a lot of times you're maybe on the back side of the power curve, or you're playing with that stall speed, and that's where you drop a wing or something like that. And if you're on final, you don't have a lot of air underneath you, so
exactly,
having something like that, a system like that, as you're kind of playing with those features of the airplane could be really handy. So while we're on that, so STOL, so short takeoff and landing, for
yep,
those that don't know, that's what STOL stands for. But what is that? Why and what have we done to this airplane that kind of makes it from just a sport plane into adding that STOL capability?
There's actually a lot of things in the airplane. One, it's just a lightweight aircraft. The whole wing is full of hollow voids to reduce the all-up weight of the aircraft. You can see it's got a very large wing, very light wing loading, so that helps for slow flight. But in addition to that, there's some features that we put on there, including slotted flaps and leading edge slats to really enhance the slow speed ability. And it's just remarkable how slow this airplane can fly and still be very controllable.
So with the slats, though, do you give up any aerobatic performance at all?
You actually do just a little bit. When you put the slats on, the roll rate is reduced maybe a couple degrees per second. The roll rate's still pretty positive even with the slats on. The biggest thing you're going to notice is the elevator is going to feel heavier inverted. and you lose some of the inverted performance. Now, the airplane will still fly inverted all day long with the slats on. It just takes a lot longer to do, say, an outside loop, for example.
Okay,
with the slats off, you can do it fairly tight, and it's just a little bit more lively with down elevator. But, you know, slats are designed to work upright, and so they're just not very happy upside down. But the benefit of the slats is they really enhance the slow speed ability of the aircraft.
So you mentioned that when you put them on, so is that something the customer can do? They don't come installed on the airplane?
Correct, yeah. You can see here we have a separate wing with these slats not installed and one of these slats loose. So basically there's these foam pads that cover the mounting spots for the slats, and you basically just peel those off and then CA glue these slats right onto the wing there. So if you choose to fly without the slats, you basically just pull the airplane out of the box and put these aside and fly the airplane. And if you want the kind of the extreme slow ability, then you can install the slats.
So you said CA, so foam safe or what regular doesn't matter because we're talking Z foam here.
Exactly. You can use regular CA, epoxy, pretty much just any type of glue.
Double stick tape?
Don't really recommend tape. The only reason we don't recommend tape is if for some reason one of these slats were to pop off but not remove itself from the airplane and it's sticking up like this, it could be a fun time trying to get it down in one piece.
Gotcha.
So we tend to make them kind of a permanent addition there. I'm sure somebody will figure out a way to make them removable, but the way we've designed the airplane, it's basically kind of a one and done type of thing to put them on. But you know, we feel everybody who's flown the airplane with the slats, once they put them on, they don't want to take them off.
Right, right. Well, that's pretty neat. So then the other thing you mentioned were the slotted flaps.
Yeah.
So slotted flaps are a kind of a unique design. It's not something that you see very often in this type of airplane, this size airplane. So for the customers that maybe aren't super familiar with what they are, how they work, why don't you explain a little bit about what they are and why they're a really significant advantage for this airplane?
Well, first I'll talk about an airplane that a lot of people are very familiar with, the Park Zone Sport Cub. That has what's called simple flaps. Basically has a foam hinge that's reinforced with tape and doesn't allow any air to pass through that flap hinge when the flaps are deflected.
Gotcha. Kind of like the elevator on here.
Exactly. You can see basically a very similar hinge to the elevator and rudder on the Timber here. If I deflect the flap here, you can see there's actually a gap that allows air to pass through the wing and over the top of the flap. And what that does is that keeps the air attached to the top of the flap and gives a lot more lift than a traditional plane flap. Also keeps basically a little bit better airflow flowing towards the tail, so you have a little bit better authority of your elevator and rudder with the flaps deflected.
So it's just a more effective design. It's a little more complicated, obviously, because now you have to have actual hinges. You can't just use a foam hinge with some tape or whatever. But that's pretty neat. And there's nothing the customer has to do to make them work. They're all plugged in and everything. Servos in there.
Exactly. Yep.
That's pretty awesome. So that kind of covers a little bit of what we've done as far what you've done as far as the short takeoff and landing and that sort of slow speed performance stuff. But there's a couple of other goodies in the box too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So the landing gear that comes on the airplane, they have a couple of options for how to get the airplane back on the ground or water, which we'll get to in a second. But the landing gear on here was especially impressive. I like the big Tundra tires are always kind of cool. You see the airplane kind of got the little bobbin thing going on.
Absolutely.
So there's some really cool stuff that you've done as far as the landing gear on here. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can tip the plane up here and you can actually see it's a fully articulated landing gear. So there's actually 2 aluminum pivots in here, and they're actually aluminum pivots that the aluminum landing gear screws to, and allows the landing gear to fully pivot. So without these springs, the gear would be very floppy and just kind of bouncing around, but the springs keep it locked in place, allow you to have deflection until it hits the stop in the spring, so it keeps from stretching out your springs. And then there's also a stop for going down, so if you hit a little bit of crosswind, it's not going to fold the landing gear underneath there.
Wow.
But very, very nice soft landing gear. You can see when you're taxiing over grass, it's actually absorbing the bumps. And then you can see the tires are big, nice, squishy foam tires. Don't have a skin on it, kind of like the Carbon Z Cub and the Park Zone Sport Cub have gotten a reputation for being a little tricky on asphalt because the skin really grips the asphalt. This being kind of a squishy foam isn't as bad and does a little bit better on pavement. But of course, if you're with landing gear like this, you really don't want to fly off pavement.
Right.
You're looking for the rough stuff.
So that's fully functional landing gear then.
Absolutely.
That's not decorative springs or anything like that. It's actually like, if it's not there, it won't work right. Kinda.
Exactly.
That's cool.
Yep.
So, well, one more thing before we move on to the flaps. You just about blinded me there with those landing lights. So this is pretty cool. And when we talked a little bit, when you mentioned some of the little details as far as the lights. So obviously it has lights, full nav lights, but the strobes are kind of cool too because they're not just a regular flashing strobe.
Yeah, they actually have the double flash like a lot of full-size general aviation aircraft. You know, a single flash is cool, but a double flash just even looks a little bit more realistic.
Sure.
Got the rotating beacons top and bottom of the fuselage, the red and green nav lights, and then of course the very bright landing lights, as you noticed. And it actually does illuminate the ground really well, you know, when you're flying kind of later in the evening and towards dusk.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So the floats. So this is not an additional item, right?
Correct.
I mean, if you break them, it's a replacement part. You can buy the replacement part, but you get the box home, you open up the box with the airplane in it, and
there's floats in
there.
There's floats. Yep. So basically allows you to pretty much fly this airplane anywhere. You know, you can fly it off land or water. The floats install very quickly. Basically, it's just a couple screws. Up here, you can see these struts basically pinch the front strut mount into the fuselage, and then there's a small plate that covers the rear strut mount. So a couple of minutes and you've swapped from wheels to floats. It has double water rudder, so they just go pull off the rudder there. And just a simple, easy keeper allows a quick connection there at the field or the lake. And they're both spring-loaded, so if you know you're taxiing or hit a log or a stick or something like that, it's not going to break your rudders. And very effective, you know, helps at slow-speed taxiing, kind of trying to fight any kind of crosswind or wind there might be on the pond. The other thing about the floats is they're very, very rigid, so it makes you can even do kind of one float landings and doesn't bounce around or anything like that. Makes it very stable. Has spray rails here to prevent the water from spraying up into your prop. And then actually has some plastic inserts here, so if you beach, the airplane doesn't start dinging up your floats too bad. So
wow,
a lot of features built into these floats. Very lightweight and just really make the airplane super, super fun. I mean, you could do so much with this airplane, and the floats just give it that one more option.
How much time do you think it takes somebody to, you know, go back and forth between the landing gear and the floats?
A matter of minutes. Like I said, it's about 6 to 8 screws to pop out, and I typically put the screws right back after I remove the landing gear, put them right back in the aluminum mounts so they're right there, don't lose them and everything like that. So it's very quick to swap from wheels to floats and vice versa.
So speaking of taking things apart for transport, you know, this probably fits in the back seat of a car, but the back seat of my car is never empty. So as far as transport goes, it looks like this is a two halves to the wing.
Correct.
And then 2 screws, looks like?
Yeah, so there's 2 nylon wing bolts here, and then there's a plastic plate that helps join the 2 wings together, and then there's 2 pins in the front that lock it to the fuselage.
Wow.
So 2 screws, the wing slides off and slides apart very easily for transport. The greatest thing is, since there's no control horns or anything sticking on top of the wing, you just put them top to top and they don't scuff each other or anything like that, so it makes it easy to transport.
Awesome. Wow, well that's pretty comprehensive. You know, it really is an airplane for just about everybody and everywhere.
Exactly.
So that's pretty cool. Did we leave anything out?
There's just a few other little details that are just really neat. You know, you have the right where the rear float mount is. You can see it here. There's actually a air vent for air out.
All right.
It has a very high diameter, low pitch prop, so it's got a lot of static thrust for doing vertical climb outs and really aggressive power for doing STOL takeoffs. And that's what's really fun, is trying to see how fast you can get off the ground and how slow you can get it back down on the ground. Also, a couple other things. It's got actually freeze ailerons. You can see they're actually hinged with a rod in there, and what they do is they actually help against adverse yaw when you deflect the ailerons a lot. So even something like that helps minimize the amount of weirdness you get when you're doing big deflections at slow air speeds. And then the Horner wingtips actually have plastic skids on them, so when you're doing those slow landings, if you tend to get it up on a wingtip, your wingtips are going to stay nice and protected when you're doing landings. So, like I said, this airplane's just loaded with so many cool features, it's actually hard to hit them all.
So you did mention short takeoffs and landings. So, I'm kind of a numbers guy. So you say short, and I'm like, well, how short? Is that 10 feet, 12 feet? But I've seen some places we're saying 2 feet in takeoff and landing. So
absolutely.
Did you do that with a 30-mile-an-hour headwind, or how did you manage to pull that off?
No, truthfully, this airplane on just about any surface will get off the ground in less than 2 feet with almost zero headwind. Landing is where it becomes a little bit trickier, and you need to have a surface that won't let the airplane roll as well. On pavement, you can touch down extremely slow, but the airplane will just kind of keep coasting, past. So on grass with a few mile-an-hour headwind, you can easily put it down in a couple feet and get it stopped. You can just drag it in, tail wheel first, and plop it down. The gear takes the absorption with the shock absorbing gear and allows you to really have some fun doing short takeoffs and landings.
Well, that's awesome. Now obviously we do our normal product video with this, so that video is up, and there's some pretty impressive takeoffs and landings in that video. And then you just got back from Joe Knoll.
Yes, we had a couple of timbers down there. We have had a great video of us flying late one evening on the lake. It was nice and calm, just doing some low passes as slow as I could make it fly in the dead calm, just having a lot of fun. And then did a really great one-wheel pass down the electric line. We were having a ball down there, and people were really enjoying the airplane. Also, there's a great video on how to turn on and off Safe Select, so check that out as well, and get a lot of information on this airplane.
So make sure if you're really into kind of seeing this stuff, because I know we're not shipping it yet, and I know it's driving a lot of folks crazy, but to get your fix, make sure you're following Horizon Hobby on Facebook and Instagram, because we post little videos on there periodically. You'll get to see it in different situations and whatnot, so make sure you check that out. And then, yeah, so Matt, thanks a lot for sharing the details on this airplane.
No problem.
And if you do have any other questions about this product, make sure to check us out at efliterc.com. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.